We were completely serious about those free t-shirts, so if you want it, all you have to do is go onto iTunes, give us a rating out of 5 stars, and leave a review, and we'll randomly pick people every week to win something. This week's winner is John Delgado. So, go rate us on iTunes and win a t-shirt. It's that simple.
Studio D.
This is what's great about sports. This is what the greatest thing about sports is. You play to win the game. You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it. That's the great thing about sports. You play to win. And I don't care if you don't have any wins. You go play to win. When you start telling me it doesn't matter, then retire. Get out, because it matters.
I'm watching my cover. Think you're fast enough? Just go right now. Hey, down, go.
In 1998, the ball boy for the Minnesota Vikings got to witness football greats like Cris Carter, Randy Moss, and Randall Cunningham every day on the field. The ball boy was there because his dad was a sports reporter and good friends with head coach Dennis Green. One day, the head coach let the ball boy run routes with the receiver, catching passes with 2 Hall of Famers in Carter and Moss. 6 years later, Coach Dennis Green drafted that ball boy with the number 3 overall pick. Have you guessed who that ball boy is? Larry Fitzgerald is arguably one of the greatest receivers of all time. With a large catch radius and some of the surest hands in football, Fitzgerald was a master at high-pointing a catch. In his 15th season, Fitzgerald still plays for the team that drafted him, the Cardinals, and went over 100 receptions every year for the last 3 seasons. Sometimes being around Hall of Famers just rubs off.
On other teams, they're telling lay still, son. You just got hit by Adrian Wilson. Yo, don't let your QB feel safe in the pocket.
Our guest today is not a Hall of Famer, but he did grow up around an NFL team, the New York Jets. Today we talk about the importance of culture to a team's success, what football players are really like, and when to take a chance on a player with character issues. I'm Dylan Garvin, and I'm more interested in the game outside of the game. In this simple sport that involves 1 ball, 2 end zones, and 11 players, how do you crack the code and build the perfect team? This is Dynasty. This is your host, Dylan Garvin, and today with us, we are talking to my close friend, Julian. Thank you for joining us.
Of course, happy to be on, Dylan.
So, Julian, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I grew up in Yardley with Dylan. I guess the context of me being on this show is I'm an avid sports fan. I've been around the NFL since I was about 5 years old. My dad, for the last 18 years, has worked in corporate development and sponsorship and sales for an NFL team for the last 18 years, but specifically the New York Jets. So I've grown up in the New York market with the New York media, and my dad kind of playing a large role in the branding of the New York Jets. As such, I've been around many different iterations and many different phases of that team and have followed them very closely, along with my dad being heavily involved there. I've been going to NFL games since I was about 6 and have been going to training camps and have known players. And I was never really an athlete myself as far as like football, basketball goes, but I've always been very interested, and I've always been super interested in the game behind the game, kind of like the theme of Dynasty, kind of how, general management works and how analytics play a role, how culture plays a role. So
we'll definitely get back to you growing up in the NFL because that's very interesting. But I
Right.
think what you do and what you went to college for is also very interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I went to Messiah College. It's a small Christian school. My undergraduate degree is in economics.
Mm-hmm.
And currently I am doing strategy and operations consulting for Deloitte. I focus mostly on state and federal government clients to basically help to streamline some of their processes and to ensure, quality and track risk and issues and all that boring stuff. But
Let me ask you, because you definitely went to school for something that's very numbers driven.
Right.
When you're analyze something for your job or whatever else, how much of the human factor do you take into consideration?
I mean, that's a huge role in everything. I think, well, a perfect example. Okay, so I work very much so with state governments, and from an analytical mindset, it's very easy to just dig into data, dig into policy, and kind of take everything at a surface level. You don't make very many abstract kind of observations unless you're really like getting in the midst of it with people and having dialogue. So like you'll be looking at a state government process and you'll be looking at state government data and be like, this is horrible. Like, how can anyone, function in this way? Like, why are they doing things this way? But then you kind of get into the gist of it and you start talking with people who are actually heavily involved in that process. And you're like, oh, like, that's why you do this. And this is why this goes on. So I think for everything, being analytical is super helpful, but there's so many nuances to things. And not everything is just about black and white. There's so much gray area in dealing with things. And I think being analytical also requires you to be a really good communicator because you need something to substantiate those analytical things that you find.
And that's why I love this podcast so much, because it's not just looking at the numbers. I really like to dig into those stories that you may not hear, like talking to someone whose dad works for an NFL team. So let me ask you, what was growing up around the Jets like?
Yeah, growing up around the Jets has been interesting. There's been many different iterations of the Jets. When my dad first started working for the Jets, Herman Edwards was the coach. And I don't know if many people know about Herm, but he's kind of the guy that sort of made famous that quote, you play to win the game. So I don't know if you remember that press conference. It's a very famous press conference, kind of up there with practice, Allen Iverson and Jim Mora.
Playoffs.
The playoffs, yeah, that guy. So Herm Edwards, you play to win the game, is up there on that level. And so that culture that he kind of developed and that I got to see that my dad was involved in, it was very much about, accountability, owning your mistakes, very hard, very set on being a team that did things the right way and did things with character. However, the flip side to that is, if you ever seen the movie Moneyball, it's kind of like this, how you have these guys coming in there who are like, oh, we're sabermetricians and we want to start doing things this way using statistics and evaluating players a different way. And then you have these old school guys who are like, no, we don't want to do that. We know a player that looks good and it's based on this, and this, and his character. And I would say Herm, from like a coaching perspective, was very much like an old school type guy. He came from that Tony Dungy, Lovie Smith type of mold. And so everything was do the right thing, be the right player, be a high character individual. You know what I mean? Like there was no ifs and or buts when it came to players like Josh Gordon or, Ezekiel Elliott. Then those guys would not be tolerated, which as sad as it is in today's NFL, you kind of need those types of players. I mean, even though they might have these off the field issues, whereas in Herm's Jets, that was not a thing. So they may not be the best team, but they're going to do things the right way, and they're going to be high-character individuals. And then, of course, after Herm, you went into the Eric Mangini era, right? And Eric Mangini was, a Belichick guy, very much the Patriot way type of person, and kind of, took some of those Bill Belichick tendencies over with him to the Jets. Now, the Jets have always been kind of like, it's kind of permeated, our existence, this saying, oh, same old Jets. And we brought Eric Mangini over, and he tried to maybe break that off a little bit. I'm a Bill Belichick guy. I'm a Patriot. I'm the arch nemesis, and I'm coming over to help the Jets. However, his tenure was marred by, the Spygate debacle and just, more inconsistency. And it wasn't really any of that different than Herm. It's just that he was probably given a little bit more time because he came from that Belichick mold. But I think the Jets were trying to incarnate so much into how we did things, and that also didn't end up working. And then, that's part of developing a culture is you bring in these guys and you say, okay, we want these type of people because this culture obviously worked there, but sometimes it doesn't always work someplace else. Sometimes culture doesn't always fit. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, Belichick had the right personnel and, quite frankly, the right quarterback to implement his system, and Eric Mangini, it didn't work for him. And then, of course, after Eric Mangini, and this is another iteration of my dad's career there, you have the Rex Ryan era, who is probably the antithesis of an Eric Mangini or Herm Edwards type of guy, just because of his bravado and his attitude and his, no BS and, we're the Jets, we're going to the Super Bowl, very brash type of personality. And I think it's almost harmful on the team when you go through so many different cultural changes, because these players that come in and out are like, what is our identity? What is our team? Like, I think culture is so important in developing a good football team, a good business, a good family. Culture is so, so important.
What did you get to witness? What were you around? What would your dad bring you to? Like, were you going to practices? Tell me a little bit about that.
I never got to frequent like a practice, but I would go to training camps. And training camp is always interesting because you're around these players who, a lot of them are carryovers from the roster last year. And there'd be these guys like Chad Pennington or Mark Sanchez or a Jericho Cottrell, kind of name stage guys that have been there a really long time. And then you have these guys who aren't that. And you have people like a Joe McKnight or Vernon Goldston, the Jets' first-round pick in like 2005. That was a bust. And you have these guys who are there who are basically like, this is my livelihood. This is my career. So I think oftentimes, like in the media, we see these NFL players as kind of like these demigods almost. It's like, oh, wow, like, they make so much money. Like, they're like, they're a football player. But then a lot of these guys, like, that's all they know how to do. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to quit football and then go out and get some, regular business job. That's very hard for them because you got to think a lot of them are coming from a Division I football program where they don't go to class. You know what I mean? They go to practice. They go to film session. They don't go to class. So all they know is football. And I think what really made me appreciate players, seeing them at training camp, seeing like, this is my career. This is how I put food on my family's table. See them in a different light that you don't always get as a fan, because as a fan, you're kind of like, if you're not performing well, like that's on you, like you stink. Like I pay good money to come to these games, and that's fair. You know what I mean? Like the team, it's their responsibility to put a, decent team out on the field that can compete. With these players at the same time, like they had so many things going on in their lives. One of my dad's best friends when he was with the Jets was Antonio Cromartie. And lots of people like to crap on Cromartie because of his, 10 kids type of thing and all of that. But at the end of the day, Antonio Cromartie is a very nice man, a very good guy, a family man, a guy that's just trying to do right, made mistakes just like everybody else, but he's so much more spotlighted. So I think going to these training camps and being around the facility with my dad kind of helped me to see these people as just human.
And you were saying you get to see these players in a different light than you would on TV because you don't really get to hear the players talk, maybe, except for the post-game interview, which is usually just like with the quarterback or the star player.
Right.
Did you notice that a lot of the players who would have success were also high-character players, or was that not always the case?
I think perfect example would be a guy like David Harris, right? He was a Jets mainstay for a really long time. Very high character guy, very quiet, never had any off the field issues. I would say that guys like David are kind of like your archetypical. So what every player should aspire to be. Mm-hmm. Very high character guy, very good on the field, quiet, like a quiet leader, right? That's how I would describe David Harris. And he had a 10, 11-year career with the Jets, so he was very successful. Now I think this isn't just speaking into the Jets specifically, although there are characters on the Jets. But you look at guys like Chris Henry. Chris Henry was, very tragically killed, but had some character issues. You have lots of guys out there who they have lots of issues that, off the field. And those guys they have all the talent in the world, right? But then all that talent is blown because they're not surrounded with the right personnel and the right people to kind of succeed. I think another good example of this would be someone like Dez Bryant. Mm-hmm. Now, I always found it interesting with Dez Bryant because Dez Bryant obviously had a ton of issues, when he started with the Cowboys. And the Cowboys literally said, we're going to have bodyguards around you all the time to make sure that you stay out of trouble. And I don't think a lot of teams really do that. But then it's also like odd because these are grown men and they're still having these issues. Like Josh Gordon. Like, come on, man. Like, you can't, stop smoking weed for like a season, and like your career is plummeted because of, character issues. So I will say, I think there is something to be said for those guys that work hard, stay out of trouble, and put their head down and go to work. They might not be the most talented, but I think those are the guys that develop really long careers in the NFL. I mean, the Patriots are perfect for that. I don't think there's a lot of guys on the Patriots roster that are that talented. However, they're high character guys. They're smart. They stay out of trouble, and they win Super Bowls.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because you see teams take chances on these players who have character issues, but you can't really have a whole team of guys with character issues. So,
no.
Like, what would you say is a good mixture? Because you got to take a couple of chances on guys, like you said. Like,
right.
You need some talent. Would you say, like, you need to have more high character guys, just solid players to fill the team, and then have a couple of those maybe star players who might have a couple character issues that you'll take a chance on?
Yeah, and I will say with, like I was speaking to you earlier with Herm Edwards, like Herm Edwards, was a no-nonsense type of guy. Those players that had off-the-field issues, they weren't on the team. They just didn't have it. And I think there was a dearth of talent at a lot of skill positions and a lot of positions on the Jets because they were like, you know what, we're not going to go for that guy. And I think there has to be something to be said for just giving a guy a chance and kind of just, understanding that a lot of these players, they have their maturity issues. I mean, they come out of college, they don't have a college degree. They have a college degree, but they didn't really get that. All they know and do is football. Then you hand them millions of dollars. And a lot of the times they're coming from very abject situations where it's like, I'm out of this situation that I was in, and now I'm a pro. You know what I mean? So I'm going to get mine. And I'm going to do what I want. And I think when you're building a team, I think you need guys like that because it brings balance. And I think, I think a perfect example of, you know the movie Coach Carter?
Mm-hmm.
It's a great movie. I would say that team was filled with off the field issue type of guys, right? It's a basketball team. And, you kind of had a coach in there who said, you know what, I'm not going to give up on these guys, but I'm also not going to let them have their way. And I'm going to, inculcate them a spirit of discipline and respect and of doing the right thing. And they turned into a championship team. And albeit that's a movie, but I think there is something to be said for a coach or whoever saying, you know what, these guys might not fit my niche as far as, what I'm looking for as far as character, but when you're building a team, you need guys like that because you can collectively bond and come together and say, you know what, you might not be what you're going to be, and you might not be mature, but there's guys who are, and you're going to learn from them, and we're going to build a great football team.
Yeah, and I would say, like, you need talent to win in the NFL.
Right.
And if you're going to collect as much talent as possible, you need to have those good coaches and that great culture in place to be able to take in those players. And it's not always going to be successful. Like, you look at the Patriots, they've had a lot of flops. I think of Aaron Hernandez. They took a chance on him, and that didn't work out. And it's really unfortunate, but you have to take those chances if you're ever going to win.
Exactly. And I think another prime example is Lawrence Taylor. I mean, Lawrence Taylor, had a lot of drug and off-the-field issues, but it's probably the greatest linebacker ever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or
Chris Carter.
Yeah, Chris Carter.
Got cut by the
Randy
Eagles,
Moss,
went to the Vikings.
T.O. Right. It's and I think Randy Moss is a great example because, Randy Moss was in Oakland and I think Minnesota, super talented guy, but came from a lot of these, like, the mooning, the crowd thing that he did with Green Bay, and then the straight cash homie, and all this stuff you see Randy Moss involved with. And he goes to the Patriots, and he's in a good system. He's with a good coach who doesn't take any crap, but at the same time takes chances on those types of players. And Randy Moss, gave Tom Brady a career year, and that team went 17-0. And aside from one of the most miraculous plays in Super Bowl history, almost went undefeated. I'm talking about the David Tyree catch. And, Randy Moss had a record year, and I think Belichick understood, all right, this guy might have some issues, but if we can kind of work that out and figure this out, there is a ton of talent.
And let me ask you one last thing. Do you have any cool stories involving Jets players, like ways you've interacted with them?
Yeah, I mean, not too many of the current roster, but I will say there's one funny story. So Darrelle Revis has a tattoo of a smiley face on his bicep, which is pretty funny. And this was a former Jets player from back in the day. His name was Freeman McNeil. He was a good buddy of my dad's. And so there would be often times that I would go out to dinner with Freeman McNeil and, do various things. And, wouldn't even realize that the guy was a former NFL running back until one day I stumbled upon him on Wikipedia. So I think that kind of speaks into what I was saying about these guys just being like normal guys. I mean, at the end of the day, like they're professional athletes, but they are normal people.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I would hang out with this guy, and then after like 6 years, I was like, who is this guy? And then I look him up, and I'm like, oh wow, that guy was a Pro Bowl running back for the New York Jets. And then other examples of guys that my dad has been good friends with would be like Leon Washington. Leon Washington was a punt returner and kick returner for the Jets and a running back. He was a really good friend of my dad's, really great, very sweet guy. And then Jericho Cottree was another very good friend of my dad's, and also another just solid stand-up guy. My dad goes over to Todd Bowles' house, the head coach of the Jets, and he says that Todd Bowles is just a down-to-earth guy, loves to have people over, super hospitable, very normal. So I think that just kind of speaks into, what I was saying earlier. I think that these guys, we try to fantasize who they are, but at the end of the day, like they're normal people, just like you and me, and they just happen to be professional athletes who are the best at what they do.
Yeah.
Or coaches who are, have minds for this stuff that we can never possess. But I think they're, a lot of the times they're good guys who mean well, and they just happen to make a lot of money and sometimes make mistakes or say things. And what's crazy about it is that I really don't have anything crazy to say. I think that at the end of the day, they're just normal people, and my dad just happens to know who they are, and he says hi to them and gets meals with them in the cafeteria, and that's that. And they've always been nice to me, and I've never felt intimidated or whatever by any of them.
Well, that's awesome. Before I let you go, we have a tradition here where we play Fake or Not Player with the guests. So if you're ready, I would like to do that with you.
Yeah.
All right. So you all know the rules by now. I will list 10 players. They are either real NFL current players or they are just totally made up names. And you, Julian, will guess if they're fake or not. You'll get a point if you get that correct. And if they're real, you can get another point if you guess their position and their team. Are you ready?
All right, I'm ready.
All right, number 1, Luke Kuechly.
Real. Carolina Panthers linebacker.
3 points. Number 2, Xavier Rhodes.
Real. Safety for the Vikings.
I'll give you 2. He's a cornerback.
Ah, dang it.
Mario Morningway.
I'm going to go with that's a fake player.
Point. Travis Kelce.
Real tight end Chiefs.
Point. Geno Atkins.
Real.
Point.
Nose tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals.
3 points. Sam Brockers.
Pardon?
Sam Brockers.
Oh, there's no way that guy's real.
Point. Darius Claiborne.
Real?
Fake.
Ah!
Travis Frederick.
That's a made-up name.
No, he's real.
What?
Would you like to guess his position and team?
Kicker.
No. Team? He's a center.
Arizona.
For the Cowboys.
Ah.
Number 9, Sam Bradford.
Real quarterback, Arizona.
And finally, number 10, Derrick Henry.
Real running back, Tennessee.
Nice, 14 points. Thank you so much for coming on. It was really awesome.
Yeah, it was. Thank you.
If you like what you heard, you can expect more every Thursday. You can also check out Season 1 if you missed it. It's about the NBA.
You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at this_is_dynasty and find our episodes anywhere you get your podcasts. If you want more, please leave us a review on iTunes and tell your friends.
Studio D.
Great development, we can have further development, the opportunities for young men. No limit today is the word. A few years ago, I think so. Yes, indeed. If the young man makes up his mind to work, there's no limit to what he can do.
Basement Dwellers is a new podcast about alcohol, cars, being young, and not knowing what to do with your life. Hosts Tyler Luther and Zach Woods talk with friends, businessmen, and people with interesting jobs. The first season premieres in October.
Hey, it's Ryan. This show is only possible because of Studio D. They handle everything from planning the recording to getting the episodes into the ears of our listeners. So if you want to make your own podcast, whether for fun or for your business, go to studiod.co, not .com, but studiod.co.